Can the Lakers survive without LeBron James? I watched their dress rehearsal against Sacramento on Friday. A lot of good, a lot of bad. I've been generally underwhelmed with the Lakers in preseason so far, but I'm trying to keep an open mind because they haven't played all their guys that much. Luka looks great. He scored at a rate of 37 points per 36 minutes in preseason on 65% true shooting. I think people forget how much of an absurd volume and efficiency scorer Luka is, and I think we're going to see that in a big way to start the season with LeBron James out. Luka's three-point shot is super locked in right now. He's 10 for 19 overall from three, 8 for 14 on his pullback three, that step back three, which is obviously one of the most important shots for him right now in terms of his scoring volume. Still plenty of room for improvement, though, for Luka. Like, he was just 1 for 7 on short twos. Again, that's like floaters and jump shots inside of 17 feet. Those are the shots that I think when he's making puts him closer to the Jokic tier on offense, because that's that like hyper reliable short range scoring mixed with the insane scoring volume and efficiency mixed with the ultra high level playmaking. That's when he starts to enter into those conversations. So I'm a little bummed because that was a big problem for him with the Lakers last year. And then he did really well with the short range shot making over the summer with Slovenia. Not so good in preseason, but it's 7 shot attempts. So I'm not about to lose my mind. I'm just saying it's an area of improvement for Luka to keep an eye on to start the year. The lob chemistry with DeAndre Ayton is really off right now. That was a big thing that stood out to me in the Sacramento game. There were like 3 or 4 easy rolls where Ayton was wide open and Luka and Ayton just couldn't connect on the pass. Not too hard to figure out. That lob chemistry is something that takes time. It's very much a timing thing. We've talked about this a lot this summer with De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama. But it takes time to kind of get like dialed in terms of like, does he want me to jump with this footwork or that footwork? And it's more for Luka to figure out. Ayton is Ayton. Ayton's going to do his thing, but Luka's got to figure out the timing. When does Ayton want the ball? What window am I passing to and when? That's the kind of stuff that Luka's got to figure out, because like, you know, the team actually looks pretty sharp in their offensive execution and they're running a lot of good stuff. They've been running a lot of stack pick and roll, but in the stack actions that they've been running, they've been getting good lobs for Ayton, good corner kicks, but it hasn't showed up in terms of efficiency yet because they haven't been able to connect on that vertical spacing piece of it. So again, something to keep an eye on. Luka's playing great, but he still hasn't figured out his vertical spacing window, and he still hasn't figured out that like kind of short range shot making piece. So point being, Luka can still get much better. Still don't love what I've seen from him on defense in preseason. No big deal, just preseason. He's been scoring at an insane clip. Something to keep an eye on, though. He's still dying on screens and complaining at the refs, getting beat off the dribble. Let's just say that if there is some sort of like new skinny Luka devotion to defense, it didn't show up in preseason. Just something to keep an eye on. Again, overall, I think in terms of their execution, I think they're ahead of where they need to be on offense, but behind where they need to be on defense. Not hard to be surprised by that. This is a team that I had pretty low defensive expectations for to start the year. But on offense, again, they're running good stuff. JJ's talked a lot about working on their screening, and they are setting really good screens. In their stack actions, one of the things I noticed against Sacramento is a lot of NBA teams do this, but they know teams want to run stack. And so all that stack pick and roll is, for those of you guys who haven't heard on the show before, it's just a pick and roll at the top of the key with a shooter underneath the basket who comes up and tries to back screen for the roll man so that you can keep an opening for a lob. And if the shooter's man helps on the lob threat, then the shooter can relocate to the top of the key and he's wide open. It essentially just makes it so that it's far more likely that either the roll man or the shooter gets open versus just a regular 2-man game where it's a lot easier for teams to defend that action 2-on-2. It's more likely to bring in help, right? But a lot of these NBA teams, what they try to do is they try to jam up that screener. So essentially, as the guard is trying to run up to back screen for the roll man, the guy who's guarding the guard will basically shove him off his line and try to prevent him from getting into position to set that back screen. I actually thought Sacramento did a pretty good job of that in this game, but they were able to set that screen enough times to get some openings. And in general, I have been pleased with their screening throughout the preseason games that I've seen. They're running some really high level stuff. I like where the offense is at. There's also a lot to be excited about in terms of guys being in rhythm. Luka's shooting the ball really well, like we talked about. Rui is in a good groove right now. Gabe Vincent is shooting off the charts. We'll talk about that in a minute because I've seen a lot of pushback from Lakers fans about the idea to start Gabe Vincent. I think it's defensible. We'll talk about that in a minute. Austin Reeves had a struggle in the Sacramento game, but he's generally been great in preseason, scoring at a rate of 25 points per 36 minutes so far in preseason. Only real beef with Austin is I was hoping he'd come into camp a little bit more sharp with his three-point shooting. He was 5 for 22 from three in preseason, 3 for 14 off the dribble, and 2 for 8 off of the catch. It's just his biggest weakness right now. I thought that was pretty clear after the Minnesota series. So I was hoping he'd come out a little bit hotter, but I'm sure he worked on it all summer. Let's just hope that that translates at some point soon in the regular season. But in general, again, I think they're in a decent spot on offense to start this year. On defense, I still think they have a long way to go. You can see them executing their stuff. Like, you can tell that JJ's trying to get these guys organized. They're just not quite at that like game speed level of execution yet. They're just like a step behind on most of their coverages. When you're already a step behind athletically, you can't also be a step behind mentally. You're going to put yourself into situations where you have to recover, and you're just not the type of team that's going to be super fast in recovery. I'll give you guys an example, like on their X outs. So like all an X out is if you bring low man coverage over. So let's say that the guy that is on the opposite corner steps over into the paint to help on a drive. When that happens, there's a 2-on-1 that forms on the weak side, right? The guy who's helping, his man's in the corner. Then you have the guy at the top of the key, on the opposite wing with his defender that's kind of sinking into the lane there, right? All an X out is like, rather than me, the helper underneath the basket, sprinting all the way out to the corner, why don't we have the guy who's guarding the guy on the wing drop to the corner and I go out to the wing? That's the X, right? So guy on the wing goes to the corner. I'm helping under the basket. I'm going up to the wing. You're Xing past each other. That's why they call it an X out, right? So in that specific sequence, there was a play against Sacramento where Luka steps over as a low man, gets into the lane to offer help. Then all of a sudden, when the ball gets contained, Luka turns to Gabe and yells, X out. And Gabe runs to the corner and Luka runs to the top of the key. But the whole thing just looks slow and stuck in the mud. And there's an easy swing pass to the out to the right corner. And Luka's man gets a wide open three that he just happens to miss, if I remember correctly, on this possession. And the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, like this is the kind of thing where they're just a little bit behind. Like, if Luka anticipates that a second earlier and calls it out, then Gabe has a good chance to chase him off of that shot into an extra pass, where Luka, because he has an extra pass worth of time to get out there, can probably get out there. And now all of a sudden we're taking away that open shot and forcing them to make a couple of additional plays in order to get a good look, right? Those are those types of like little mental execution type of details where they're a step slow right now, where they need to be sharper. You can see it in their peel switches. You can see it in some of their transition defense in terms of like getting back, stopping the ball, getting to the basket, fanning out to shooters. They're just on everything. They're a little bit slow right now. I think they're working in the right direction. I had hoped that they'd be a little further along at this point, but I don't think this is a team that's going to come out and be 15th in defensive rating in the first month. I think this is a team that's going to come out and be 23rd, 24th in defensive rating in the first month. Marcus Smart showed a lot of good in that game, but not in the ways that I think people were hoping. Like, he was able to force a turnover, jumping a driver in transition where he kind of jumped the right-hand drive and got a steal, went out the other way. He showed some ability to rescue plays, hitting some tougher shots. So like late shot clock, no one's really open. Hits like a rainbow three off the left wing. He had another play where late in the clock, he put the ball on the floor and hit a little jump shot in the middle of the lane. You can tell he's got a lot more refined offensive skill than some of the other guys that have played that position in years past. But I don't think he's looked particularly fast. I don't think he looks like he's ready to guard superstar guards to start the season. I don't think he looks like a primary point of attack option yet. Now, hopefully he continues to get his legs underneath him and then he eventually gets to that point. But right now, I don't think Marcus looks like a solution to their point of attack problems. So again, as we kind of zoom out on the defense, I didn't have super high expectations, but I will definitely be watching them because they're a little bit behind where I'd like to see them be at this point in time. Really quickly, before we're done here, I want to talk about that decision to start Gabe. So JJ Redick starts Gabe against Sacramento. tells reporters that that would be a starting lineup in the Tuesday game. For the record, I personally would have started Vando. I'll explain why in a minute. But I do think it's hilarious how I've seen so many Lakers fans get upset at this decision. I think Gabe Vincent is a perfectly fine option to go to among several flawed options. So first of all, who are the options? Marcus Smart, Jared Vanderbilt, Gabe Vincent, and Jake LaRavia. I don't think you could make a case for any other guy. And so as we start going through those four guys, I don't necessarily see any of them as the obvious choice. Like Lakers fans are clamoring for Marcus Smart. And by the way, if he was faster, he looked quick and ready to handle that massive point of attack job, I'd be right there with you. I don't see that yet. To me, he seems like a guy who should be coming in off the bench and just doing all the little Marcus Smart stuff that he does in that context until he gets his legs underneath him. Maybe in a few weeks or a few months, but I don't see him as an obvious pick right now. Jared Vanderbilt would be my pick. The reason why is I think he's athletically ready for the job. He makes the lineup more physically imposing. All of a sudden, with Vanderbilt out there alongside a giant DeAndre Ayton, a giant Rui Hachimura, and a giant Luka Doncic, you're pretty big. He raises the athletic profile of the lineup. Obviously, offense and spacing would be difficult, and that's the downside. I also like that it appropriately slots Gabe as a secondary ball handler, right? So if you have LeBron, Gabe's your fourth best ball handler. He can really slot in anywhere at that point. But with LeBron out, all of a sudden he's your third best ball handler. And so you can accomplish that through staggering, like pulling guys out and putting them back in certain ways. But I think it's just a little bit more natural if you bring Gabe in off the bench. That said, even Jared Vanderbilt is not a perfect option. He's just 2 for 13 from 3 in postseason, had an ugly air ball that was about 3 feet long into the left out of the right corner against Sacramento. He's 5 for 11 on layups. So he's been given 24 layups and threes, and he's converted them into 16 points on 24 openings there. The shot looks better. I'm a big believer that it takes time to translate standstill shooting to practice shooting to game shooting. So like, I'm not giving up on Vando as a guy who could potentially in the future become a guy who can knock down a catch and shoot jumper, but he's clearly not that right now. And he still is struggling to finish layups. So he's not an obvious pick. He's who I would pick, but I don't think it's obvious. Jake LaRavia has looked slow, and he's 3 for 13 from 3 in preseason. So it's not like Jake LaRavia has earned the spot either. So the point is there is no obvious choice. What Gabe does provide is a guy who's solid at everything. He's athletically quick enough for the job of guarding opposing guards, even though he's obviously undersized. That would be a downside, as he obviously lowers the athletic profile of the lineup. But Luka, Rui, Ayton is still a pretty big front line. They're not going to be tiny. They're just not going to be as big as they could be with Vando. Gabe can dribble, shoot, and pass well, so he can kind of do any role in the offense. And he's been in a great rhythm since the start of preseason. This is crazy. Gabe Vincent is scoring at a rate of 26.2 points per 36 minutes in preseason. He's 15 for 27 from 3. And it wasn't just the nuclear showing in Vegas against Dallas. I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch that game. I watched it live, but Gabe came out and hit like 5 threes in the first 4 minutes and drew a foul on another. Just went like absolutely ape shit to start that game. But then he came out in a smaller role alongside Austin and Luka. Was 4 for 5 from 3, 14 points, 0 turnovers in the Sacramento game. He's playing well. So what JJ sees is a guy who he can trust, who he knows will execute the game plan, who's capable of the defensive job, and who's shooting the shit out of the basketball as of late. So yeah, is Gabe the long-term solution to the starting 3? Of course not. But I think he's a perfectly defensible option to start the season with. Overall, on the Lakers, I don't think they're as sharp as they need to be to get off to like a great start this year. I don't think they're going to be awful on defense, but I think they're going to be pretty bad. I don't think they're going to be amazing on offense, but I think they're going to be pretty good. If they're going to be pretty good on offense and pretty bad on defense, that's a mediocre team, right? So I don't think they're going to get off to some great start. That said, the one thing that might save them here is they do have a pretty light schedule to start the year. And that might be exactly what they need to survive this stretch without LeBron. Looking at the schedule, Golden State and Minnesota to start, Obviously, a couple of tough games there. You split those, you're happy. But then Sacramento and Portland, who both are feisty and both have some issues. Sacramento's athletes gave Austin some issues. Portland, all of you Golden State fans who watch Golden State over the preseason, you saw how feisty Portland can be. They have a lot of good players. They're young and athletic and have some decent ball handling above what you would think for a team that lost Scoot Henderson. So those are going to be tougher games, but those are games that you feel like Luka should be able to do enough damage in that you can win. Then Minnesota, again, that's tough. Portland, again, winnable game. San Antonio, winnable game. Atlanta, winnable game. Charlotte, winnable game. Oklahoma City on the road without LeBron, that's probably a loss. New Orleans, winnable game. Milwaukee, winnable game. Utah, winnable game. Utah, winnable game. And if you get to there, that gets you to November 23rd. And you hope to have LeBron back by then. So I do think the Lakers could play mediocre basketball to start the season and still be 9-7. And I think 9-7 with LeBron coming back is not a bad spot to be. I think a huge win for the team would be if LeBron came back on the 25th and your team's at 11-5. So that I think is going to be a nice little barometer for how they've started the year. So in short, I haven't been super impressed by the Lakers in preseason, but they have a light schedule to start the year, so they have a good chance to survive in the standings without LeBron.